Hello everybody, it's Houda Dihaji on your channel Moroccan Academics, the channel where you will find everything you need as an academic student or a university student here in Morocco. And also, if you aren't an university student, you can you can join us in our journey to discover the world and also improving in order to improve your general culture. So let's get started. This is our lecture outline. So the first thing we're going to talk about is a definition of that discipline, psychology. Then we're going to see the scientific method because it is the most important thing, and it is what every researcher starts with in order to understand any scientific field. After that, we're going to see the history of psychology to be aware of the fundamental schools of psychology. We have to know a little bit about the history of psychology. And then, as I said, the main schools of psychology and their main ideas, of course. And finally, we're going to end our lecture with some key terms that are going to be very important and that I translated for you in Arabic in order to emphasize it very well. So, what is psychology? Psychology is the scientific study of mind or mental processes and behavior. I'll read it again. Psychology is the scientific study of mind, mental processes, and behavior. This is the latest definition of psychology, which is a scientific definition. Okay, so here we have the word scientific study. Scientific study, which means that it depends and relates on the empirical method, which means that we have a lot of experiences and we have the scientific method used in that discipline in order to understand what the mind or mental processes and the behavior. Okay, that's great. So here are some few cases that the science of psychology is interested in, and it is the key which tries to understand these bizarre and strange cases. So we have here Clive Warren. Let's read a little bit about it. So here, Clive Warren is an accomplished musician who lost his ability to form new memories when he became sick at the age of 46. While he can remember how to play the piano perfectly, he cannot remember what he ate for breakfast just an hour ago. Oh, what a strange case, actually. He cannot remember what he ate for breakfast, which means he lost his memory, but he still remember how to play the piano, how to produce music. He is the one who said that you can forget about everything except music. So here the discipline of psychology says, oh, this is my job here. I will find out what's the problem with that man. Okay. Here we have James Wannerton. So, James Wannerton experiences a taste sensation that is associated with the sound of words. Oh, he said that his former girlfriend's name tastes like rhubarb. That's crazy. So, this guy, experiences a taste sensation that is associated with the sound of words, which means that when he hears the sound elephant, maybe he tasted pizza or something. So he said that his former girlfriend name tastes like rhubarb, and rhubarb is it's a type of food. So that's really strange. And we have John Nash. This man is very famous. So John Nash is a brilliant mathematician and Nobel Prize winner. However, while he was a professor at MIT, he would tell people that the New York Times contained coded messages from extraterrestrial beings that were intended for him. Oh, he also began to hear voices and became suspicious of the people around him. That's called paranoia. Soon thereafter, Nash was diagnosed with schizophrenia and admitted to a state-run mental institution. That's very sad because he was a brilliant mathematician, and the movie A Beautiful Mind. It is dedicated to him. It was his. It was the movie about his story of his life. So yes, and psychology is here plays the role of investigating about these kind of cases. And this case will going to blow your mind, and I'm pretty sure about that. So we have phineas Gage. We have that Gage suffered a severe brain injury from an iron rod penetrating his skull, of which he miraculously survived. After the accident, Gage's personality was said to have changed as a result of the damage to the frontal lobe of his brain. So here, this man, Phineas Gage, was working as he was fixing the railroads. So these iron roads were he was fixing them because they were the railroads, and when he pushed one of them, it reflects on him and beat him that entered from his eye and get out from his crown, and that's really crazy. He lived after that. He lived, and he lived for several years, I think. But after that, he died, and his family and his friends reported that his personality had changed so much that he changed too much to them. But he's still alive, and that's really crazy. So, here, in order to understand these strange cases and to know how psychology deals with them, we have to ask some bunch of questions like these that we have right here. So, why did these people have these experiences? How does the human brain work? And what is the connection between the brain's internal processes and people's external behaviors? Okay, so we have to search for the relationship between the internal processes and people's external behaviors. So this presentation will introduce you to various ways that the field of psychology has explored these questions. As we mentioned earlier, that we are going to talk about the scientific method. So in the scientific method, we have certain, we can say, a protocol, as we can say, in the scientific method, where the researchers use some kind of methods which are rational and empirical also, in order to get some findings in their research. So here we have psychologists use the scientific method to acquire knowledge. The first aim is acquiring knowledge, okay? To apply the scientific method, a researcher with a question about how or why something happens will propose a tentative explanation called a hypothesis to explain the phenomenon. So here we have the notion of hypothesis, which is in Arabic faradiyya, which is the most important things that we start with in order to start a research. A hypothesis should fit into the context of a scientific theory, which is a broad explanation or group of explanations for some aspect of the natural world that is consistently supported by evidence over time. So this means that the hypotheses have not to be far from the subject or the matter that we are aiming to search for or to investigate in. So a theory is the best understanding we have of that part of the natural world. The theory is the best understanding we have of that part of the natural world. After making a hypothesis, we tend to create a theory in order to make some structures or patterns in order to understand the natural world, which means natural phenomena like studying mental processes and human behaviors. After that, the researcher then makes observations or carries out an experiment to test the validity of the hypothesis. Those results are then published or presented at research conferences so that others can replicate or build on the results. So, here is the scientific method. Actually, I just mentioned some of the fundamental or main cores of the scientific method, but I'm going to make other videos, inshallah, in this channel to explain further the scientific method with some examples and so on in a specific video, inshallah. So now let's talk about the history of psychology. And let me read for you this slide. While psychology did not emerge as a separate discipline until the late 18th or 19th century, its earliest history can be traced back to the time of the early Greeks. During the 17th century, the French philosopher René Descartes introduced the idea of dualism, which asserted that the mind and body were two entities that interact to form the human experience. So let me explain that. Psychology emerged as a separate discipline until the late 19th century. What was before? But that it was included in the philosophy. So philosophers were studying human psychology in the field of philosophy. So it was related to the rationalism, which means the study of the mind and behavior in a rational way without giving a lot of importance to experiments or laboratories. They wrote about consciousness, they wrote about the mind, until the philosopher René Descartes is an example, of course, that talked about the duality of mind and body, which separates the mind from the body or the mind from the brain. And it was sometimes the human psychology in philosophy studied as a field of metaphysics, which is the non-physical world that is included in non-physical world as human beings' own souls, and not biological and not bodies that have some biological and physical traits. So many other issues still debated by psychologists today, such as the relative contributions of nature versus nurture. So nature is when we talk about nature, we talk about our genetics, our biological aspects, our history of ancestries and so on. But when we talk about nurture is when we deal with the physical world, when we deal with our environment and society, and the influence of these circumstances on our health, psychological health, on our minds and bodies, on our behaviors, of course. So these problems are rooted in these early philosophical traditions, and until the 19th century, that the laboratory of Wundt that we are going to explain later is the first clock that rings for the starting of the field of psychology.